The movie opens in a hospital room, where an old man named Leo is lying in his bed. He appears to be in the last stages of his life. Just then, an unknown woman approaches him and takes off his oxygen mask. Leo claims that he is going to die anyway, as his body has been riddled with an incurable tumor. However, the woman has other plans. She pushes a food trolley against his neck, and the screen fades to black. We are then introduced to our protagonist, Donal, a middle-aged man who lives on a farm in Belfast. Despite having gray hair all over his face, he is still unmarried and lives with his mom. He spends most of his time reading newspapers, working in the field, and hunting animals. Donal also has a passion for vehicles. He earns extra income by selling old refurbished cars and has set up a garage to carry out the repair work himself. Apart from all this, Donal has a very close bond with his mother, Florence. The two make sure to have dinner together every single night, and Florence appears to be an extremely kind woman who is always ready to help others. One day, as she is reading a newspaper, she suddenly becomes upset, and Donal believes she's sad because their neighbor recently passed away. However, the truth is that she has learned about Leo's death. It is evident that the two have a history. That evening, Donal goes to a pub to unwind. As he waits for his pint, a drunk guy starts acting rude to the bartender. He then makes fun of the fact that an old guy like Donal is still living with his mother and even calls him a silverback gorilla. When Donal asks him to calm down, the guy tries to get into a fight, but before he can do so, the bartender kicks him out. In the next scene, Donal goes straight to his garage and starts working on an old caravan. He fixes its damaged engine, paints it red, and gives it a brand new look. The next morning, he brings his mom to the garage to showcase his new vehicle. He offers to take her to Montague, a beautiful beach where Florence and her late husband spent a lot of their early days. But for some reason, she gets agitated. She mentions that she is old and cannot travel anymore. She also asks her son to stop spending so much time on these machines, and poor Donal is devastated by her outburst, as he only wanted to make her happy. Later that evening, Florence returns to the caravan with some beers and says that she loves the music he's playing. Donal then turns up the song's volume so that she can hear it from her room. He downs the beers one by one and falls asleep in the caravan. He later experiences a weird dream, where he finds himself wandering through a dark forest, right when he comes across his mother, who is eerily vacuuming the ground. She looks at him and says, "Help, Donal," causing him to jolt awake from his sleep. He then rushes to check on her and spots two unknown people quickly leaving the house in a car. Following this, he rushes inside the house, only to find his mother's bloodied body on the ground. Donal quickly grabs his phone and calls emergency services. In the next scene, we see the cops interrogating a distraught Donal about the incident. They inquire if he saw anything suspicious, and Donal replies that he saw two people leaving in a car. One of them appeared to be a fancy-looking man. However, he doesn't have any more details, as it was very dark. After completing his mother's final rites, Donal slowly moves on with his life. He tries to keep himself distracted by spending most of his time in the field and with his cattle. However, he struggles to prepare dinner, as he was heavily reliant on Florence. One night, as Donal is cleaning her bedroom, he finds a load of cash under her mattress. He also comes across an old picture, where he and his mom are together with a man and his daughter, and it says, "Me, Joe, and the kids." But then, all of a sudden, he hears some noise coming from the garage. Donal grabs his shotgun and slowly heads there, and spots a masked guy in the darkness. From behind, he is held at gunpoint by the second intruder, who asks him to drop his weapon. Donal is ordered to stand up on a tool where he will be hanged. The intruders then tie a noose around him and drop the tool, but to his good luck, the rope appears to have slacked. The armed intruder orders him to wait in the corner, and without wasting any time, Donal grabs a hammer and fights back. He eventually kills the guy by bashing his head repeatedly. Donal turns his attention to the second guy, who clearly appears to be a rookie, and takes off his mask. Donal then threatens him for information, and the guy reveals that they were sent by some people to kill him, but he doesn't know much about them. Enraged, Donal ties him up in the garage and calls the emergency services to tell them about the situation, but he changes his mind at the last second and hangs up. Donal now wants to take matters into his own hands so that he can find out who is responsible for all this. He orders the other guy to answer the dead intruder's phone, and the latter is visibly scared to do it, lying that they have got the job done. Here we get to know that the scared thug's name is Bartosz, and the one who died is Damien. Bartosz worriedly asks if he can see his sister now, and the guy on the other end provides him with an address and time. Hearing this, Donal, who wants to get to the bottom of the truth, decides to go there. But first, he buries the corpse on his farm with a tractor and heads to the said location with a tied-up Bartosz. On the way, he tries to find out more information and stops the vehicle on the side of the road. Bartosz, who is shaking with fear, reveals that he is actually from Poland. He and Damien were sent to kill Donal by a guy named Gavigan, but he doesn't know the reason why. Gavigan is the same guy he talked with in the garage last night. Bartosz then discloses a shocking truth. His sister, along with several other girls, have been held captive by the bad guys, so he has to follow their orders. They are actually pimping the girls for money. Hearing all this, Donal feels bad for the boy and says that they should help each other out. He mentions that if Bartosz is actually speaking the truth, his sister will be in danger as he has just failed his mission. Following this, the two resume their journey and eventually arrive outside the mentioned address. As they discuss their next move, Bartosz reveals that his sister's real name is Kaya, but they have given her a new alias now. Just then, a vehicle arrives outside the location, and a man escorts a woman inside. Bartosz believes that it is his sister, so he decides to go inside first, and Donal warns the boy not to try anything stupid. He then grabs his classic shotgun and follows him from behind. As soon as Bartosz enters the compound, he finally comes face to face with Gavigan. He claims that Damien was set to meet him here and that they have completed the mission, but Gavigan doesn't want to believe him without any proof. Here Bartosz gets to know that the girl from earlier is not his sister, she has actually been brought here for execution. Gavigan cruelly remarks that she tried to run away, so her punishment is death. He then begins choking her, while Bartosz is restrained by another thug named Jerome. On the other hand, Donal has also sneaked inside the premises. As he scans through the place, he finds a bunch of Polish passports, which he keeps with himself. Meanwhile, when Bartosz cannot take it any longer, he admits that Damien was killed by the farmer, but he managed to take him down. Gavigan appreciates him for his honesty, but he still proceeds to brutally finish the girl off with a hammer. After this, Jerome picks up her corpse and heads to stash her in the storeroom. But as soon as he enters, Donal comes from behind and locks the door from the outside. He then heads to the main hall and confronts Gavigan at gunpoint. Donal forces the man to the caravan and knocks him unconscious when he talks too much, after which they drive off from there. Soon, they arrive in the middle of the woods, and Donal begins his interrogation while having lunch. At first, Gavigan acts all tough and refuses to speak, but when his head is burnt by a boiling pot, he begins crying and divulges all that he knows. He claims that a man named Trevor hired him to kill Donal, but he doesn't know the motive behind it. When Donal inquires if Trevor is a fancy-looking guy, Gavigan confirms it. This means that Trevor and the second person inside the car killed his mother. Donal then asks who that second person is, to which Gavigan replies, "That is the boss." Following this, we are finally introduced to this boss. She is revealed to be a wealthy woman, and her name is Frankie. Trevor apparently works under her command. Back at the woods, Donal pauses the interrogation and heads outside to take a leak. Taking advantage of this opportunity, a tied-up Gavigan tricks Bartosz and makes a run for it. Donal spots him fleeing, so he quickly grabs his gun and chases after him. Moments later, Gavigan stops at some spot and manages to untie himself. The first thing he does is call Trevor to update him on the situation. Frankie, who also overhears the conversation, is furious that they couldn't kill the farmer. Later on, when Gavigan sees Bartosz, he jumps the rookie from behind and almost beats him to death. But then, Donal arrives in the nick of time, and Bartosz exacts his revenge by stabbing the guy twice in the abdomen. This causes a lot of bleeding, and Gavigan pleads with them to save him. But when he realizes that he won't make it, he decides to go out on a good note. He reveals that Kaya's work name is Alicia. After he passes away, he is buried in the woods secretly. Later, Donal goes to his Uncle Eamon's house to find out more about his mother because he believes that she knew something he didn't. Donal brings out the picture from earlier and asks about it. At first, Eamon tries to avoid the topic, but when Donal insists, he starts revealing that the man in the picture is Joe Pierce, a good friend of Florence. The little girl is his daughter, Frankie. Eamon discloses that Joe died decades ago when he was gunned down by some gangsters led by Leo. Florence tried to save him by hiding him near a beach, but he was eventually caught and killed. Taken aback, Donal asks why he wasn't aware of all this, and Eamon responds that his mother wanted to keep him safe. That's why she left the city and relocated to the countryside. When Donal returns to his caravan, Bartosz, who now knows his sister's alias name, requests that Donal book an appointment with her and rescue her. He claims that she can help them get to Frankie and Trevor. Donal is a bit hesitant about this, as it seems to be a risky plan, but he eventually agrees. He then pretends to be a customer and books a room with Kaya. Meanwhile, Frankie is at her home when she gets a call from Trevor, who mentions that they have identified Bartosz's sister, and Jerome is on his way to get her. After she hangs up the call, we see that she was reading the news about Leo's death, the same old man from the start of the movie. On the other hand, Donal gets dressed up and heads to the said location, which turns out to be a large but empty hotel. When he reaches the room, he finds a guard at the entrance. Donal then ventures into the master bedroom until he finally comes across Kaya. She appears to be scared, but he eventually convinces her that he's a friend and allows her to finally talk with her brother. The two then team up and incapacitate the guard. Donal then asks Kaya about Frankie's location, but she appears to be unaware of it. Here, Donal realizes that Bartosz tricked him so that his sister would be saved. As he still lacks any solid leads, he starts torturing the guard for information. As a result, the man gives an address where they can find Trevor. Donal and Kaya then prepare to leave, but at the same time, Jerome arrives there. This ensues a deadly battle between the two men, with Jerome coming out on top. But before he can finish off our hero, Kaya grabs a gun and shoots him dead. Following this, she helps a bruised and battered Donal out of the building. When Bartosz finally sees his sister, he is overwhelmed with happiness, and the two hug each other affectionately before speeding away in the caravan. Shortly after, Frankie and Trevor arrive at the same hotel room, only to find Jerome's lifeless body. They also discover the guard, who is gravely injured, so Frankie inquires if he divulged any information, to which the guard says that he didn't talk about her. Nevertheless, she is so upset at their repeated failures that she grabs an iron and beats him to death. Elsewhere, Donal now wants to go to the address where he can find Trevor and finish him off, and after all she has been through, Kaya is willing to accompany him too. Bartosz tries to persuade her to return home with him, but she remains resolute in her decision. Perhaps she wants to take revenge on all the bad guys that harmed and tortured her. They then track Trevor and tail him to an upscale neighborhood. Eventually, they find Frankie, and Donal prepares to kill her right then. But when he notices that she has a daughter, he decides to wait until the night. He later tells the siblings to go home and even hands them their passports and some money. Meanwhile, at Frankie's place, she has grown tired of Trevor's incompetence, as he has still not been able to catch the farmer. So, she fires him and decides to take matters into her own hands. At night, Donal suspects that his uncle is not safe, so he goes to check on him. Unfortunately, it is already too late, as Uncle Eamon has been brutally attacked and left to die. In his final moments, he reveals a shocking truth. Turns out Frankie's father, Joe Pierce, was a gangster and was in a relationship with Donal's mother. The two had their own separate families, so they kept their affair hidden. They loved each other a lot, but Florence betrayed Joe and handed him over to Leo, his rival, which resulted in his demise. Uncle Eamon claims that she did so to protect her son, as the gangsters had threatened to kill young Donal if she didn't comply. After revealing all this, he passes away, leaving Donal more confused than ever. A few moments later, Frankie arrives at Eamon's house with one of her henchmen, hoping to end the saga once and for all. However, Donal easily outsmarts them. He knocks out the man before taking Frankie hostage. Following this, we are taken to the Polish siblings, who are seen sleeping at a hotel. They are ready to take off for their hometown the next day, but Bartosz is feeling guilty for not being able to help Donal, so he grabs his gun and ventures out. A while later, he arrives at Uncle Eamon's house to check if Donal is there. Unfortunately, he is captured by Trevor and the same henchman from earlier, who had also come looking for our hero. In the meantime, we learn that Donal has taken Frankie to the same beach where her father was killed. He digs up a grave and plans to bury her there. Here, Frankie begins revealing the actual truth. She says she visited Leo in the hospital a few days ago and wanted to kill him, as she believed he was responsible for her father Joe's death. However, Leo disclosed that when he had arrived at the beach, Joe Pierce was already dead. Leo says that he was called to the scene by none other than Florence. Soon after, the cops arrived, and Leo was framed for the murder. Donal refuses to believe this until Frankie reveals that she spoke to Florence before she died. The movie then goes into a flashback to that fateful night when the old woman died. Florence admitted that she was madly in love with Joe, so much so that she actually put him over her own family. However, when Joe refused to leave his family for her and tried to end things, Florence tried to stop him from leaving by pointing his own gun at him, but accidentally ended up shooting him dead. She is still sorry to this day for what she did. Unfortunately, Frankie is enraged that her innocent father was killed for no reason, so she bashes the old woman's head and finishes her off as well. In the present, Frankie pleads with Donal to let her go. She mentions that if he kills her, her daughter will become an orphan, just as she herself had been orphaned when her father died. This eventually changes Donal's mind, so he decides to leave her. But as he is walking away, the cunning woman attacks him from behind with a shovel. She then rushes to the caravan, unties her ropes, and grabs her gun to kill Donal. But then, he arrives there and kills her first. In the final scene, Donal gets a call from Bartosz. But Trevor speaks on the other end and asks about Frankie's whereabouts. When Donal reveals that he killed her, Trevor decides to do the same with Bartosz. Donal pleads with him to not do so and even offers to give himself up. However, a gunshot is heard on the phone, indicating that the poor boy has been killed. The movie ends as Donal calls emergency services but once again hangs up without speaking, probably deciding to take matters into his own hands again. Thus, we reach the end of this film. Thanks for watching. You can like this video to support us. Don't forget to subscribe for more content. See you in the next video. Goodbye.